Hello everybody, I hope you're all well. Welcome to the geography part of your home learning for this week. So for part of our wider curriculum, we are going to be focusing on geography again. So that means we're going to be revisiting the polar biomes. This time we are actually going to be looking at some animals that live in the polar biomes, and we are going to be looking at what features they have that help them survive and how they've adapted to live in these harsh environments. So the first activity that we are going to do, I've got some pictures here on my flip chart. Now there's a mixture of some animals, so there's animals from both the Arctic and from the Antarctic, and I'm not going to tell you which from which because that is going to be our activity in the next flip. But what I would like you to do is I'd like you to think of some similarities that these polar animals share. So what are some things, just from looking at them, that you can see are the same, or using what you already know, what do you already know that these animals have in common? Okay, so if you want to pause the video here, and then we will just go through it together briefly. Okay, so hopefully you found some similarities that I have found, so hopefully we have got some that are the same. So as you can see up here, we have got a fox-looking type animal. So this is actually an Arctic fox, and here we have an Arctic hare. Now both of these animals are white in colour, their fur is white, and they've got a lot of it, haven't they? The fur seems to cover almost all of their body. Another thing they have in common is their features are very small, aren't they? So sort of like their faces and their muzzles, so like their noses. This is to conserve as much heat as possible. So they don't want to have much of their body on display because that means that they are going to be losing precious heat. And in minus 40-degree environments, you can't afford to be losing any heat whatsoever. You need to stay warm, okay? So that is something that these animals have in common. That is a feature that they have. They've also got very small paws, which helps them to burrow or bury in the snow if they are looking for vegetation, if they're looking for things to eat. Okay, down here we have got two of my favourite animals. We have got a walrus and we have got a seal. Now, upon looking at them, the first thing you notice they've got in common is they're quite chunky, aren't they? They have got a lot of meat on them. Now, that is for a particular purpose. That is to help keep them warm. This also helps to battle starvation. So if there is a period of time where they're unable to find food, they can rely on those fat stores that they've got in their body to keep them going and to keep them alive. Right, here we have got 1, 2, 3, 4. We have got some animals that live near or go in the water. So here we have got an emperor penguin, which has got its amazing flippers that help it glide through the water and enable it to push itself through. We have got the narwhal and the killer whale. And these two have got thick layers of blubber. So again, like the walrus and the seal, this helps keep them warm for long periods of time. Oh, and then here we've got the krill. I think krill are very, very cute. And they have a different way of surviving. So instead of making themselves bigger by adding more and more blubber, they are actually able to shrink down so that they can survive for longer periods of time. Okay, so they're able to shrink themselves down so they're perhaps not using as much energy to swim around. And that helps them survive a little bit longer because they're not needing to use much energy because their bodies are big. So I hope you're able to find some similarities between those animals. We are now going to see if you can decide which of these animals live in which polar region. Okay, so the polar regions, again, let's remind ourselves, we've got the Arctic, which is in the northern hemisphere, which is going to be near the North Pole, and we've got the Antarctic, which is in the southern hemisphere, which is obviously going to be near the South Pole. So we know that the Antarctic is a continent and it is extremely cold. The Arctic, we know, is made up the Arctic Circle is made up of several countries, but when we speak about the Arctic, we're talking about the Arctic Ocean. Okay, and the Arctic tundra, sorry, that was the last lesson we did. So I want you to, let me just spread these pictures out so that you can see them a bit more clearly. Okay, so these are the pictures that we have. So pause the video and try and decide which animals you think go in which side, okay? What you could do is you could write on a piece of paper Arctic, Antarctic, and then list the animals as best you can. If you don't know the specific names, just write down what you think they look like. So the Arctic fox. Okay, so have a go at that and then come back and we will put them in their specific habitats, their specific environments. Okay, so I hope you will manage to put them in some sort of order. Right, let's go then. So I'm going to start over here actually. I'm going to start with the polar bear. Now we know that the polar bear lives in the Arctic. And remember we said before that people get confused as to where the polar bear and penguin live. Penguins live in the Antarctic, so the majority of penguins do actually, well, live in the southern hemisphere, any wild penguins anyway. So krill, they are in the Antarctic. Arctic hare, I think the clue is in the name, don't you? And also with the Arctic hare, I'm hoping you put it there because in the Antarctic there is, there is no vegetation. So rabbits are going to need that vegetation to be able to live. Arctic foxes, again, Arctic. And then walruses, we have got walruses living in the Arctic. Seals, there are many different types of seals, but there are both seals in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Okay, and the same applies for killer whales. There are killer whales in the Arctic, but there are also killer whales in the Antarctic as well. Gulls, they are living in the Arctic. And then, penguins and krill. I haven't got that many animals in the Antarctic, have I really? But penguins and krill are in the Antarctic, okay? But remember, I suppose killer whales and seals are there too. Now, there are many more animals that live in the Antarctic than the ones that I have just shown you. So I thought it would be really cool if we had a look at some food webs. So we could have a look and see just how many different types of species there are and where they're getting their food from. So in the Antarctic, remember we said about the lack of vegetation. So that means that animals are carnivorous, so they need to eat meat to survive. So we can see from here, we've got some organisms down here that live in the sea. So we've got phytoplankton and zooplankton. So these will be really, really small organisms, and these are eaten by krill, which are only slightly bigger. And then here you can see as we move up, we've got some types of fish. We've got squid. We've also got some Antarctic birds as well. Then as it starts getting to the top, you can see that the animals get bigger and bigger. And you can see here that the killer whale seems to eat absolutely everything. Okay, but you can see that there's no vegetation here. So that tells you about the landscape and what exactly it looks like. So let's compare that to the Arctic food web. So I've got two Arctic food webs here. So I will show you what those look like. So here we have got an Arctic food web that starts with, move these ones out the way. That actually starts with our mosses, our shrubs, and our lichen. So these are all small plants that grow on the surface of the Arctic tundra, and they are then eaten by things such as ermine. So these are like small stoats or ferrets. Lemming, the Arctic lemming, which burrows itself. It burrows under the ground basically, so that's how it stays warm in such a harsh environment. And the harlequin duck. So you can already see how the wildlife in the Arctic is so different to what's in the Antarctic. and that has a lot to do with the physical geography of the place that they live. And here we've got slightly bigger animals. We've got the musk ox and the caribou. And then up here we have got the Arctic wolf and the snowy owl and the Arctic fox. Okay. So let's have a look at the other Arctic food web. So this one looks a little bit more carnivorous. So it looks a little bit more meat eater orientated. Okay, so we've got Arctic moss and Arctic algae, so obviously that's vegetation. And then we have got our small organisms, and we're moving up to fish, seal, and then polar bear. But can you see in the Arctic how, when we were talking about permafrost and how climate change is affecting the Arctic, that's also going to affect the Arctic algae, moss, and the lichens and the shrubs here. So that could also impact these animals up here. So let's have a bit of a focus in on an animal in particular. Let's have a look at the adaptations and features that they have that make them suitable for living in this environment. Okay, so I've got a picture of a polar bear here, and under here, under the picture is a close-up of some polar bear fur, so you can see just how thick it is and how much heat that must hold in. Under here I've got some pieces of information, but I wanted to hide them just so that it wasn't so overwhelming when we first looked on the page. So let's have a look through them together. So skin. So the polar bear's skin is actually black. So this helps it to conserve heat because black is a really good colour for holding in heat. Okay, so the fact that they've got black skin all over their body, it means that when the sun is hitting them, it means that their body is absorbing any warmth that that sun is giving off, which is really important in these harsh climates. Also, they have a thick layer of fat under this skin, which can measure up to 11.4 centimetres. Now, I've got my ruler here because there is quite a lot of measurements in my polar bear information, so I thought we could have a look through them together. So 11.4 centimetres. So that is how thick the layer of fat is underneath the polar bear's skin. So that is very thick. That is going to help keep them very warm in those cold climates. Okay, so next up we have got their features. So as you can see, the polar bear is a massive animal, but its muzzle and tail, which you can't really see at all, are tiny. And that is just to conserve as much heat as possible. So what we were talking about before, they want to save as much heat as possible because it's so cold. So there's no point in having a tail where they can lose lots of heat, or really big ears, because it's just no use to them. And their claws. So polar bears, they've got thick claws which are curved, and they're very sharp and strong. And what was it? They measure longer than 5 centimetres. So that's 5 centimetres, so they could measure 5 centimetres or more. So I'm not sure I'd want one of those claws in me if I was an animal in the Arctic. They also use them to hold on to prey, so to help them grip prey, but also to grip onto the ice, because it would be very slippy if they didn't have these, so they're quite useful to help them move across the ice with. Paws. Now, this is a pretty amazing one. Polar bears' paws measure 30 centimetres across. This is 30 centimetres. So let me just put my hand next to that. So in a polar bear's paw, you could probably get my hand 1, 2, 3. 3 times across. I wonder if at home you've got a ruler and you can see, if you put it on its side like this, 30 centimetre ruler, see how many times your hand would fit inside a polar bear's paw. I wonder if it's as many as mine, or if you can get more in there. So it helps them tread across the thin ice. So because their paws are so large, it helps them stay steady, and their body is so big, so they need to make sure they've got 2 big stable paws that will help them keep their balance across the ice. And they also act as large paddles when they're swimming. So can you imagine something this big pushing through the water? It would be really powerful and be able to move quite quickly to chase prey. And fur, okay? So they've got 2 layers of fur, and then they've got that thick layer of body fat, remember, that we measured out? So this provides insulation. So insulation basically means that this provides a way of keeping warm, okay? So imagine you've got a blanket on you and you're really cold watching TV. That blanket is going to insulate you and keep that warmth in. And that is what their 2 layers of fur are doing. Now, a little problem with this is that their body temperature doesn't change even when temperatures reach -37. So that is why you will rarely see a polar bear running, because if they were to keep running and running and running, they would just overheat and get far too hot, which which is fine if you can let some of that heat out. But if you've got a body that wants to keep all that heat in, then it's going to be very difficult to lose it. Okay, so their fur is really excellent at keeping that warmth in. Another really interesting thing is their fur isn't actually white, it is transparent, and the inside of it is hollow. Okay, so there's nothing inside it, and it scatters and reflects visible light. Okay, it also means that some heat isn't really absorbed by the fur, and it's absorbed by the skin. So it just means that they can stay even warmer. So I think polar bears are absolutely amazing, and there are many facts that I have learned just through looking at this, and I think they're just incredible. So that is one of our animals. We're then just going to have a quick look at the penguin, and then you are going to go and do your activity. So penguins, they live in the Antarctic. I have chosen to look at an emperor penguin in particular, okay? Again, just like seals, you get lots of different types of seals. You get lots of different types of penguins as well. So apparently research has shown that the penguin's body offers less drag than any marine animal. So what this means is that when it glides through the water, its shape helps it glide through the water so easily, and there's nothing to like drag it back and stop it going slowly. So the fact that its fur is very smooth on its body, its fur is also waterproof, so that helps it glide through even quicker. Okay, so it can glide through the water speedily and easily. This is also really important in terms of getting away from predators, because you need to be fast if there are killer whales and seals and all things out to get you in the Antarctic. Flippers. So as you may know, penguins cannot fly, but their flippers are very useful for swimming, and it helps them power through the water. And some penguins can go from up to 9 miles per hour. So that's pretty fast. So next time you're in the car with your parents and they are going, let's say 10 miles an hour, you could ask your parents to go 10 miles an hour in a car. And that is almost the speed of a penguin swimming through the water. So see if you can do that next time that you go out in the car. If you're going, you might be going shopping with them or something like that. Feathers. Now they've got 2 layers of feathers. Remember I said, so they've got feathers, not fur, sorry. So remember I said earlier how they've got 1 layer that is waterproof. So that's going to help keep them warm as well, because when they get out of the water, they're not going to be all cold and soggy and trying to dry off in the Antarctic sun. So that helps them keep them warm. And the underlayer is a thick layer of stiff, short feathers, and that helps provide warmth as well. So having those 2 layers is really great, because it just means that it is keeping them warm. So it's like having 2 coats on. Imagine if you went outside and you had 2 coats. It's going to be warmer than if you've got 1 coat, aren't you? And feet. So they've got small feet, and It is quite funny watching a penguin walk, isn't it? So they do have a bit of a waddle. However, their feet help them in the water because they direct where they are going. So they act as rudders. So if you look at the back of a boat, you've got a rudder. And if you move it a certain way, it will move the boat a certain way. Okay, and their feet do the same. So although the penguin, it looks like a very simple animal, it's actually really complex, and it's got all of these things that help it survive in the wild. And these things are really particular to surviving cold environments. Okay, so what I would like you to do now is I would like you to do the same that I have done. So find an animal that lives in the Arctic or the Antarctic, and I want you to find some facts about them. So go through their features, so you can go from top to bottom, head to toe, and find out all the important adaptations that they have that help them survive in those really harsh landscapes and those harsh climates. I'm happy for you to do whichever animals you like. If you would like to use some of my information and do the penguin or polar bear, that's absolutely fine. This information is here and you can pause the video and write it in your own way. I have added some websites onto the wider curriculum overview, so you could have a look at those and see if there's anything else you would like to maybe do. So you can either lay it out like I have done and put bits of information under subheadings so you could practice your non-fiction skills as well, or you can sort of draw arrows off and label, whatever feels right for you. Also, as I said before, there's lots of different types of seals. So you could always research the types of seals, types of whales. I'm happy for you to do whatever animal you would like, but they need to live in the Arctic or Antarctic because we're doing about the polar biomes. Okay, so I'm looking forward to seeing which animals you would like to focus on, and I hope you enjoy it. Take care, have fun, bye.